Show screen. Doc, I don't know what's going on.
Can you see me?
I can see
I
you.
can see you. You can hear me.
I can hear
I
you.
can hear you. Okay, I'm on Quintessa's computer.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so I think we'll be good.
All right.
All right.
Let's see if I can. Good evening,
Good evening,
Saints.
Prentis.
We are
We are
off to
off
a
to
late
a late
start.
start. right? The Great Pyramid of Khufu. Pyramid of Khufu is many things. It's a temple, it's a tomb, and more importantly for our discussion tonight, it's also an astrological observatory. In other words, the Egyptians used this to measure the earth, not just Egypt, not just the land, but the entire earth. If you look at it on a map, the Great Pyramid sits in the center of our land masses, of all of our land masses together. So that's going to become a very key issue here in a moment. Now, most of you don't know, it's kind of hard, we don't get this in our education, that when you see the Great Pyramid, it's not the way the pyramid originally looked. You are looking at the ruins of the Great Pyramid. Originally, the Great Pyramid was covered with white limestone. The entire structure was covered with white limestone. At the top of the pyramid was electrum. Electrum is gold and silver mixed together. Okay, now, this is what happened. This is why you don't see it like this now. When the Arabs came into Egypt, they stripped the Great Pyramid of its casing, and they stripped it of the capstone, and they made their mosque. This is the mosque of Muhammad Ali, not the boxer. This is King Muhammad Ali. This is who the boxer was named after. Everything you see on the top of the building, the white part of the building, is actually part of the casing stone of the Great Pyramid. All this was part of the Great Pyramid. But the Arabs stripped it. And so what you see today is something that the Arabs did in around about the 8th century AD, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. So what I'm saying here is that Africa in many ways has many pieces. I'll show one more example. Everybody's seen the Great Sphinx. Most people know that the Sphinx does not have a nose. It was blown off by the French. Last time the damage was done by the Arabs, this time by the French. Okay? But what we don't realize is that the Great Sphinx also had a beard. Today you see it on the left like this. Okay? And it had a beard. This is how it originally looked. Okay? Now, most of us don't know that. And even though we don't know that, look at here. This is part of the Sphinx's beard. This is not in Africa. You know where this is at? This is in London, England. So if you want to know about the Sphinx, you can go to Egypt and you can see part of the Sphinx, but the other part is in London. This is the kind of thing we are dealing with when it comes to African history. This is the legacy of colonialism and slavery. Now look at this. We can see this is the side view of the beard of the Sphinx, and you can see that it used to be red. In other words, the Great Sphinx used to be completely painted. But you know how sand is, when it hits the rock after so many years, it chips off the paint. So we don't see it. When we go there, we only see, the way the rock that they carved it out of look. But the Sphinx at one point must have been painted. Okay, this is to tell us that if we want to understand African history, we can't go to just Africa. It has to be something bigger. Okay? Now, this is a reconstruction of Isaiah 18:1 and 2. Believe it or not, tonight, because there is so much to talk about, we will not get past verse 1 and verse 2. This is what it says. To the land of whirling wings, which is a reference to locusts, along the rivers of Kesh, that's Ethiopia, the one who sends ambassadors by sea in ships of papyrus on the surface of the water. Go swift fleets of envoys to a people tall with long limbs and having smooth skin, to a people feared far and wide, an aggressive nation of strange speech whose land is divided by waters. Tonight, we're going to talk about only what's in red. We're going to talk about 5 words. And these 5 words have to be understood if you're going over the land. And she sent a expedition down to Punt, which is Somalia. So she sent ships to Somalia. It's very famous. It's recorded in many places in Egypt. And you're looking at one of the reliefs, and you can see that there are, see, this is not just a little boat or a dugout. This is ships with about 20 men rowing. And you have on this ship a lot of things that we can identify. Let's look at a rubbing. The rubbing can show you many details. Look at like how many sails and all these kinds. They're loading cargo here. You can see the cargo that they're loading. Okay, here's a stingray. We can identify a stingray. We can identify a swordfish. This is not just me pointing something out that's trivial. This is going to become very important. All right, so we know that the Egyptians sent ships on the Red Sea, the same Red Sea we talk about. It's a little more complicated than that, but the Red Sea that we talk about, they sent ships down to Somalia. All right, now just keep that in mind, keep that in your hat. All right, now we turn to something very different. We're going to look at the toxicology report of Ramses II. All right. Ramses II was in Cairo. They brought him to France. They examined the mummy. A lady toxicologist, when she ran the tox screen for Ramses II, she found the presence of nicotine in his skin. And because she found nicotine in his skin, she decided to go further, and we found mummified tobacco in his belly, and also fragments of tobacco leaves that was part of his mummy wrappings. This, brothers and sisters, this is a real problem. This is a very big problem because conventional wisdom says that tobacco only grows in America. In fact, we have many records, many books, many parts of literature that tell us that Columbus is the first man to introduce tobacco on this side. But this is hundreds of years before Columbus. So how does an Egyptian pharaoh in the 19th dynasty of Egypt get his hands on a product that only grows in America? This is a real problem. In case I'm not being clear, let me tell you what I'm saying. I am saying that when Isaiah 18:1 is talking about sending ambassadors, it's not just the Red Sea, it's not just the Mediterranean. I am saying that Africans came to America before Columbus. Now, this is radical. I realize that, but we are so far behind in understanding Africa's role in the Bible that we are having to catch up because we have challenged so little. We believe everything they told us about Africa in the Bible. So now we're having to catch up. All right? We can document 5 voyages to America that we know of. 5 of them. 2 of them before Jesus and 3 of them after Jesus. Okay? The first one is Ramses II, who has tobacco in his stomach. All right? Taharka, we mentioned him, and I told you to keep him in mind because we were going to run into him quite a few times, and you're going to run into him quite a few more times. After that, we have 3 more after Jesus. I'm going to introduce to you the works of Ivan van Sertima. He's a professor at Rutgers University. He was a personal friend of mine. And even though I don't have time to tell you, I'm going to tell you anyway. Van Sertima and we exchanged a lot of correspondence together. We finally met in Nashville. And at one point, he asked me what part of African studies, what did I want to go into? And I told him theology. And he said, you have chosen the most difficult discipline. He said, if we could liberate the Bible from Eurocentric thought, he said, we could win back most of our people. Now, I'm telling you, never forgot that. Van Sertima is the first person to really come out and make a real case that Africans came to America before Columbus. Okay? Now, we need to make a jump. I know this is a radical, but we have to leave biblical times for a moment. We'll get back there, but we have to leave it for a moment. It's very important. So y'all stay with me, all right? Here we go. We're going to leave biblical times, and then we're going to jump to the 8th century AD. This is after Jesus now, about 700 years after Jesus, all right? About 700 years after Jesus, you have a movement called the Moors. It's right after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, when the Arabs cross over into Africa. It's not a war. It's peaceful. It's loving. And there began a real movement of Islam all over Africa. Okay, this is why you hear people say that Islam is the black man's religion. Well, that's an inflammatory accusation. Africa has many religions. But anyway, the Moors, they will eventually conquer Europe. Now, this is the connection why we're going here. Oh, let me tell you this. The Moors were composed of many different people, but the bulk of the Moors are the Gadamantes, whatever to the right. The Gadamantes were revered warriors, revered soldiers, and they represent a major force within the Moors. To the left, you see a Moorish commander. Now, this is very important. In about 640 AD, the Moors conquer Egypt. This is very important, this connection here. When they conquer Egypt, they go into the tombs, they go into the temples, and they translate Egyptian wisdom, Egyptian literature, Egyptian science, and they translate it into Arabic. And they take it from Egypt, and eventually those documents will end up in a place called Timbuktu. Location specifically Sankore University. Sankore University inside the Timbuktu Mosque. Many documents were stored there. Okay? Now, remember, they're not exactly Egyptian. It's Egyptian wisdom, but it's recorded in Arabic, but it's still the same Egyptian wisdom. Now, we have those documents. Those documents are not in Egypt anymore, but they are in West Africa. You have to appreciate the technology that went into building this great mosque. What you're looking at is a combination of both Mande and Egyptian technology to build this structure. This is the official number. We are not sure of the number. We think it's a whole lot more, but conservatively speaking, we have 440,000 documents that we have not even touched. Many of them have not even been translated. They're in many African languages. The bulk of them the majority of them are in Arabic. We have not even read them. And trust me when I say that a lot of those documents will have direct bearing on what the Bible means. Even though they are coming through Islam, the wisdom that is coming from Egypt. Look here. We have those documents. I've taken a few of them that I could identify. Okay, these are ocean navigation charts, instructions on how to navigate on the ocean, not the Nile River, not the Jordan River, the ocean. as in the Red Sea or the Mediterranean Sea. Here's one of the books. This is by Al-Masudi. Al-Masudi tells that Africans crossed the Atlantic. Another one, Al-Idrisi, another one who writes, look at the year. His world map is in 1154 AD. Columbus will not come to America until 1492. So already Africans are mapping, and I should say Africans and Arabs. Africans and Arabs are mapping how to cross the Atlantic. This is Al-Amari. He was a poet, but he talks about legends about coming across the ocean. So in the past, they haven't taken him very seriously. If you were to take him alone, perhaps, but there are other people saying the same thing. Now, we go back to biblical times to talk about biblical times to say that Africans came to America before Columbus. We got to prove it because nobody's going to believe this. This is just radical. Thor Heyerdahl, he was a Norwegian explorer. He loved navigation, ocean, any adventure. He went into the Egyptian Museum, and while he was in the Egyptian Museum, he found something. This is what he found. He found, and this is the rubbing of it, a picture of a ship, not a boat, but a huge ship. And he looked at the fish under the boat in the water, and he recognized the fish. But this fish did not swim in the Red Sea. It did not swim in the Mediterranean Sea. It only swims in the Atlantic. So Heyerdahl formulates the idea that Africans had crossed the Atlantic in ancient times. Well, everybody said that's ridiculous. Africans could not cross. So Heyerdahl said, fine, I'll prove it. So he decided to build a ship the exact same way that the Egyptians did. And he was going to make a voyage across the Atlantic in a papyrus boat. Remember, Isaiah 18:1, papyrus ships. Now, papyrus boats are used all throughout Africa, well, on the Nile and on the Niger. So these boats are already in use, but we are not talking about being on a river. We're now talking about the Atlantic Ocean. So scientists laughed at him and said, now you can't build a ship out of papyrus. It's nothing more than a type of weed, grass. And if you put it in the water, it's going to get waterlogged and it'll sink. Papyrus is a fantastic plant. They make paper out of it. And how poetically the Bible is recorded on papyrus. The reason why the Bible has been handed down to us is because of this plant. Now, Heyerdahl proposed to use this same plant to cross the ocean. He chose an international crew. This is not the boat, but he chose an international crew. He wanted to prove that we can work together and that no matter where you're from, we can work together. So he started to build the boat, and he said that the honor of building this boat must go to the Africans. So this is the Baduma people who have been building ships out of papyrus for many hundreds of years. They were the one who was allowed to construct the boat. Everybody know where they're at? They're in Egypt. They wanted to prove that the Africans had come across the ocean, and they wanted to duplicate it exactly. So you see here, a man with a bundle of papyrus around his shoulder. And right here, this is one of Heyerdahl's sailors. He has the same way. Heyerdahl wanted to not only do it similarly, he wanted to duplicate it exactly. Look at that. Beautiful. This is in the middle of a desert. See, I think this is an important point here. We have to think about African history very differently from European history. And we are still trying to learn exactly just how great that difference is. The ship was christened Ra, designated after the Egyptian Ra, who represented the energy of the sun. Okay, so when they got ready to go, it was not a secret. This is not some secret happening. This was known, and there were many publications and documentations and all sorts of ideas about how this was all going to work. And scientists said he won't get 10 miles off of shore. Here's his crew. Thor Heyerdahl as the captain. Baker is from the United States. Everybody's from everywhere. Look at, you have from the Soviet Union, Italy, Mexico, of course, Africa, Egypt, Norway. Everybody, he wanted to get as many people as he possibly could into this experiment. The papyrus ship Ra 2 set sail from Morocco, North Africa on May 17th, 1970. There she is. You can see on the sail, the sun. This is the representation of Ra. Heyerdahl knew that there would be controversy. He knew that people wouldn't believe him and all of this stuff. So he kept a log exactly of what was happening. And just to be certain that I'm not just making this up, you can see where he's writing. And my favorite picture of all the shots, this is my favorite. Okay, this is Thor Heyerdahl right here. This is him. Okay, this is Baker. He's the navigator. If I remember correctly, he's from Germany, Italy. Kay is from Japan, and I think he is from the Soviet Union. He had everybody involved. Now, this is what I want you to see. Halfway. At this point, they had already traveled 1,659 miles in a boat made out of grass. The same grass that the Bible is recorded on. They went through 2 storms because remember, you can't predict the weather all the time. And so they went through 2 storms, and the papyrus ship came through it. There were problems. They had problems many times, but it kept going. On the evening of July 12th, 1970, the papyrus ship Ra 2 arrived in Barbados, West Indies, after traveling over an astounding 3,320 miles in only 57 days. It took Columbus 61 days. So not only did it cross, it beat Columbus's time by a week almost. 4 days, actually. Now, with that in mind, read your text again. And all of a sudden, it appears very differently. And I will stop there. We have time for some questions, and please ask your questions. I think the questions are in many ways very, very, very important.
Yes, and let me. I've got an echo going on here. I'm going to take our conference callers off mute.
and it was the only knowledge that Europe or Africa had of the plant. At least at that time, nobody knew anything else. Europe. In the center of it, it grows very big, and you can in the middle of it is a gum-like substance, and that gum-like substance, they count on that gum-like substance because when they build the ship, ropes, when they put it in the water, it swells. Amazing. I've read and I've seen a few videos on how it works. Truly amazing. Believe it or not, it's all done with rope. Some of the rope is papyrus itself. They braid papyrus together to make a rope. So it's an impressive plant.
See. Did the Native Americans pre-arrive from Africa? I always thought they were already growing tobacco. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Yes. Well, the question was asked. Let me see if I can pull it up again. Did the Native Americans pre-arrive from Africa?
Type of thinking, but as far as the Bible is concerned, we don't have any kind of any any word on that. As far as I understand, the Native Americans are quote unquote indigenous to their area, and Africans and Native Americans met as early as we know in the time of Ramses II. That's what the evidence.
Okay, all right.
By the way, Thor Heyerdahl also has a museum. I'm not sure where it's at, but and so there's a lot of information about his exploits, not ownership that he made. In fact, Raw 1 failed. But there are a lot of things that Thor Heyerdahl left behind in all of his adventures and things like that, and so there's a museum to it.
All right. I have been unable to bring my conference callers off mute. Saints, you're just going to have to forgive me. I'm just having all kinds of tech problems. Here we go. All right, conference callers, you are now off of mute, I believe. Unmute. All right. So I believe that concludes the questions. Dr. Williams, you're also going to have to forgive me. I'm just having some tech problems here today. By next Wednesday, I hope to have them all worked out. And so let me... Would that papyrus also have been the material used for baby Moses' raft?
General. Now, I want to stress the idea that's on the screen right now, and that is sooner or later, we are going to have to come to grips with what Europe and America and how it has crafted our understanding of the biblical text. And as African and African American especially, the more we go into biblical scholarship, we are going to start challenging and questioning a lot of the things that's been put forth. Now, principles will remain the same, doctrines will remain the same, but our perspective and understanding of how these things work within the Bible are going to be very different. And the reason why is because Africa is the foundation of the Old Testament.
And so, understanding Africa will better help us understand the Old Testament.
Correct. And that's going to become bigger and bigger as scholarship goes on. And the reason for that is because that so many of the ideas we typically think of as Hebrew are not Hebrew at all. They're actually African, and more specifically Egypt, because remember, the Israelites spent 430 years there. For example, let me give an example. The Hebrew writing system. You see what we use, what you see on the screen, the reconstruction of African history. You see the letters we're using? That's not English. That's Italian. That's Roman script. The English, the Anglo-Saxons don't have an alphabet. They never developed the alphabet. The Hebrew alphabet arises out of Egyptian hieroglyphs. That's not new. That's known among scholars, but they tend to try to play it down. But no scholar will question that. The Hebrew writing system arises out of the Egyptian. So you're going to have this. Circumcision is not Hebrew. Abraham didn't invent circumcision. The first time when God gives Abraham circumcision, that's not the first time that it was given on the planet. We can document circumcision in Egypt 600 years before Abraham is even born. So if you're going to understand circumcision, you're still going to have to come through Egypt. There's going to be a lot of things like this. And what happened is biblical scholars have known this, but they wanted to craft Christianity in a certain way. Not to lie, but not to tell you the whole truth as well. And racism is definitely a strand in here. It really, really is. And this idea, we're going to, it's going to become much more prevalent as time goes on and when biblical scholarship, as it progresses. I'm in many ways, I'm coming in at a very pivotal point. I think there's a transition going on within the field.
The Hebrew Israelites say that we people of color are the original people of the Israelites. How do you see it?
Okay. I want to say this right. I think they like to be called the Black Israelites, if I remember correctly. I hope I'm doing that right. I want to address them respectfully. So I think that's the way they like to be referred to. But if I understand them correctly, and there's no cohesion among them, they're very loose knit in their doctrines and their theology. But here is, I think, their basis. This is their basis. They base their ideas on Dr. Windsor. And the name of the book is called From Babylon to Timbuktu. That's the name of the book. That is not their Bible, but it's a source for where their view comes from. That's the major view. So if you want to understand the Black Israelites and where they're coming from, what their beliefs are, what their ideas are, their thinking and stuff like that, you must read From Babylon to Timbuktu. Now, having said that, when you read Dr. Windsor's work, you realize that in a lot of places, he's speculating. He has no evidence for what he is suggesting. It sounds good, but there's just no evidence to support it. He's speculating, but he makes it sound like it's hardcore doctrine when it's not. And so the evidence, in many ways, has a lot of holes in it. That's my feelings.
Okay.
I also understand why it appeals to black men. And see, this is something I think the Christian church is going to have to come to grips with as well. We're going to have to address black men's feelings about the church, and there's a lot to deal with that. And if we want to evangelize, if we want to win African Americans to the Christian church of any denomination, especially the males, we're going to have to address this idea of what has become ingrained. Because I've had many brothers tell me that they're tired of hearing about Jews and they want to hear more about their own. That's very prominent among brothers, and brothers are very outspoken. They won't get up in church and say anything like this, but when you get them alone and interview them personally, you find out what they really think about the Christian church. And they're not wrong in many ways.
What is the, let me see if I can word this right. Well, were the original Israelites, were they black Israelites?
You know, that's a complicated question, because it's really based on how you see the biblical Exodus. Okay, now we, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we take that literal history, and I'm going to take that position as well. If you say that the Israelites came out of Egypt, then we're talking about black folks, and that's the position I take, because the original 12 come into Egypt. Many of them married black women. Starting with Joseph, he married the daughter of the priest. Okay, now from that original 12, they live in Egypt among black people, nothing but black people, for 430 years. Even if they were Aryan when they went in, after 430 years of mixing of nothing but black folks, they were definitely black folks when they came out. Yeah. Now, see, this is something that biblical scholars have also played down, because the Bible gives a number, if I remember correctly, 600,000. But the 600,000 number that's given there is talking about soldiers. It's talking about fighting men. And so if you add 600,000, and then you talk each man, for each of those men, there's at least one woman, and we want to say, what, 2 children, and we're being very conservative here. You're talking about a lot of people who are leaving Egypt, and they are definitely black folks. You don't have any 95% of all of Egypt is black. There are no Greeks or Romans or English or Norwegian. Those people have not reached Egypt yet. So there are no white folks around. These are all black African people. Now, like I said, biblical scholars have really tried to play this down. But when you start looking at it closely and numbers and all that kind of stuff like that, and anytime you bring it up within literature, biblical scholars says race is not important. Race is not important. Race is not important. And the reason why they can say that is because it's already been established that every picture you see in literature, in your Sabbath school lesson, in children's book, all those are going to be white. And so they don't want to talk about race because they don't have to. The structure has already been built. So, a lot of people want to know if Jesus was a black man, which is, irrelevant if you ask me. But for brothers see this as a very, very, very important issue. And so when you start to say that the people who came out of Egypt were black folks, or to be nice, to say they were very dark-skinned people, very brown-skinned people, or something like that, then Jesus is definitely not going to look like Michelangelo's version of him.
Well, it seems to me that every race has Jesus depicted with their facial images and their, various attributes.
Yes. I served at the Adventist University in Korea, and I will never forget one day. Actually, it was my first trip. I walked by a Bible bookstore, and I saw Jesus lifting Peter up out of the water. And the picture of Jesus was Korean. And not only was he Korean, he had on Korean traditional dress. And I stood there and looked at it, and I said, it makes sense that we do need to see Jesus in an image that we can relate to. Okay? And so I think that's good for people, and that includes Europe, to portray Jesus as white or Korean or anything else. The problem is when we start to believe that it's literal truth. Now that's the problem. Yeah, represent Jesus in any way you want to. But when you start to believe that that's literal truth, there's a problem. And that problem is very deep.
Well, all right, Dr. Williams, let me just once again apologize to you and to my listeners. I will make sure that I start extra early to make sure all of the bugs are out of the system so that we can have a trouble-free broadcast on next week. And so I do beg your indulgence on this week. I promise that we will do much better on next week. And so before the reverberation takes over, let me just say a word of prayer and we will close out. Father in heaven, we thank you for our presenter. We thank you for sharing with us once again. So now as we dismiss, we ask that you would go with us. Thank you for all that you do in the name of Jesus. Amen. God bless you, my friends, and good night. Brother Mims.
Hey, Pastor.
Hey, you got a minute?
Yes, sir.
Several things. This coming Sabbath, Vanessa was going to be our speaker. She recorded a message, I think, right before my series, and I told her that I would get it on as soon as I complete my series. And so when she sends the music, she's going to send that video as well.
Oh, okay.
And I will be doing the order of service.
Oh, you will be, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so we'll do it that way.
All right. No problem.
Did you ever get the security thing done?
Well, I called I put the thing and said, because I didn't remember my
Password.
my password. I was going with the username you sent me. And they sent the thing for the password, and it said it was going to send it to the email, which I assume was your email.
Oh no, that's it. They're going to send it to the email address, your email address that starts with a J, Jim.
Oh, okay. Let me check that right quick and see how that.
Okay, but you can't put in the password that you got from me. That's the overall problem. Everybody that comes into the church, it records them as pastor, as me.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has to get their own username and their own password in order for it to work correctly. You follow me?
Okay.
And so.
So was that the one that you had given me? What you had given me was your password and everything?
At the beginning when we set up, yes.
Oh, okay. So now we have to do our own thing.
Yes. In order.
I was trying to get it, it wouldn't work. Then I have to set up a new one.
Yes.
Okay.
And I sent the one with your name. Did you see?
What now?
The text message I sent you had your full name and a number next to it. Did you see it?
Larry Men's 5 or something like that?
Yes. That's your username. They already have it recorded. That's your username. So this way, when you go into the church, that name will pop up in the activities log. So we'll know who's in the church.
So how do I now set up a password? I just go into the system and say I don't have a password?
Well, when you go in and you put in the new username that you have, no matter what you put in the password box, it's going to fail. And then they'll give you that, I think it's login help that shows up on the right side. Then you click on that, and then it's going to send a link to your email address on how to set up that, for you to set up your password.
Okay. All right. I'm clear now on that now.
Mm-hmm. And so you have to log out of the app.
Yeah, I logged out of it.
Okay, and then log back in with that information.
Now, my name is case sensitive?
No.
Okay. So, okay. All right, well, I'll give it a try. I'm going to try it now.
Okay, all right. And one more thing. When I get feedback, I need to target or do something with the speakers or the microphones.
What happens now?
When I get feedback, is that a problem with the microphones or the problem with the speakers?
When are you getting feedback?
Oh, I got feedback tonight. It was killing me.
Tonight?
Yes.
Yeah, you should have to be checked to see if you have more than one microphone running. So if you have the prayer line on and the thing that you're talking through, sometimes that may be the issue. So you can't run from the same room maybe because it may be causing a little feedback from there.
If
they're right next to each other, then that may be what you're experiencing, feedback from both mics.
So I need to make sure that there's only one active mic in the room.
Right. I feel like that could be the problem because when you did something the last time, it had stopped the problem.
Yeah. See, there's a mic on the webcam, and so that's active.
Right.
And then I've got my main mic that's active.
Right.
And so I need to I need to.
Yeah, so maybe turn down the volume on those mics. Maybe that will help it. Does the webcam mic have to be active?
I would have to go into, I guess, the on the computer and go into the program and select the mic that I want to use.
Absolutely.
But see, I don't know if that's going to kill. See, the webcam. If I unplug the webcam, I won't have to worry about the mic, but I'm also killing the camera.
Correct.
So
you definitely need that.
Yeah.
Yes, you just have to find a way to mute one of those mics.
Okay.
That's going to be the issue.
All right.
How to mute one of those mics. Either that or, I don't know, covering it with a piece of tape somehow so it would be reduced wherever the mic is coming from. Try to see if you can cover that with a piece of tape.
Okay.
To see if that will help.
And so when I have more than one mic open in the room, because
it gives you like this kind of looping feedback, like an echoing sound, and people are like, "Wait, I'm hearing an echo." And I think that's because there's two open mics somehow in there.
Okay.
Because if you're talking into one mic and the other mic is picking it up, that's why it's catching that kind of echoing going on. I understand about the feedback, but I know the echoing that we were hearing the other week, I think that was part of the problem.
Okay.
But feedback definitely would be most likely related to the mics because you don't really have any. Do you have any like huge speakers in the room that could cause the feedback?
Well, no. Well, there's the speaker on the monitor. Okay. And then I have a small, what do you call it, amp that I use to control the level of music coming out of my iPads. That's the background music.
Okay, yeah. So you got a few things that are.
Yeah.
You probably gotta try to shut them down one by one and see which one is causing the problem.
Oh, okay. I hadn't thought of that one.
Yeah, so just hit each one and just say, okay, once this is gone, is it still giving me the problem? And just go from there. So just start with one mic and then the speaker, whatever speaker you're using. Right?
Okay, all right.
And then from there, add the mic with the other, issue of the other, the mics and all those kinds of things. And just see if it improves or it stays the same or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? Just kind of ruling out whatever the issue is in this way.
Gotcha. Well, all right, Doc.
All right, Pastor. So I'll let you know once I get this up and running for my thing.
All right.
All right, Pastor.
Yes, sir.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye.
Oh. How in the world did this happen? Hello? Hello?